Some people say that gentrification does more good than harm, but I personally believe it's unfair to those who are the lower class because the lower class aren't able to afford when their rent increases and they're forced out of their homes. And like, I personally see it here in Brooklyn, and I've started to see in my neighborhood that Jewish people are starting to move into our neighborhood, and my apartment building rent has began to increase, and like, it impacted my family and other people in my neighborhood as well, who can't afford the increase on our rent.
Sure. Um, has gentrification affected you in any sort of way since you? Yeah.
Sure. So just a little bit about me. So my name is Mike. Um, my day job is a community organizer at a organization called Fury, Families United for Racial and Economic Equality. We're a Brooklyn-based organization that organizes around gentrification broadly, but specifically around public housing issues. And I guess part of the way that I found this organization was through the gentrification that happened in my neighborhood just north here in Fort Greene. So just a little bit about that. Fort Greene is right on the other side of Flatbush Avenue from downtown Brooklyn. And so back in 2004, there was a planned rezoning of a piece of Fort Greene, in addition to a large part of downtown Brooklyn. And so as a part of that process, there was basically this maybe 4 or 5 block strip commercial businesses that used to be stores. It was a supermarket, and once that area was rezoned, it basically meant that it wasn't just allowed to have those commercial businesses anymore, and it was allowed to have residential buildings. So once that rezoning happened, basically the owner of that lot, of those lots together, he basically evicted all those businesses. He demolished all those buildings, and he put towers in their place. And so the last tower is just opening up, and it's been about 13 years since the rezoning. And so that was really, I guess, that kind of put gentrification on my radar. I'm thankful enough to say that I'm not at risk at displacement because my family actually owns the apartment that we live in, so I'm not actually a tenant. But I live in a community that's seen rapid, I guess, rises in rents and rises in real estate prices, and it's real. So it goes to the schools that I attend and how they're different now versus when they were when I attended. It goes to the businesses I see when I'm walking, from here to work every day. It goes to see the types of people I see in the neighborhood. There's a lot of people that didn't live in the neighborhood 10 years ago, because 10 years ago it was a different place compared to today.
So one of my burning questions that I wanted to ask is that why do you think gentrification has such a negative connotation attached to it? Because when doing my research at the start of this whole program, gentrification was seen as a good thing for the community because it was bringing in the influx of economic prosperity to the whole community, and it was supposed to benefit everyone. Why do you think
Has a negative effect on people who actually lived here before new people started to move into that area?
Sure. So you have to look at the word. So gentrification has the word gentry, right? And so gentry is a group of people who usually have historically owned land and had access to education, wealth, and often, I guess, the ability to manipulate the political process in ways that are beneficial to them. And so if you use it in that framework, it is beneficial, but it's only beneficial if you're a member of the gentry, right? If you're a member of the gentry, then you have a new place that you can live. Now, within the American context, you have things like redlining, and you have a racist and classist history of saying that certain communities get money and resources and certain communities don't. Now, we look at Brooklyn and New York City. The places that are gentrifying are communities that were redlined, right? Redline meaning that basically the government said that because your community has too many black people or too many Jews or too many Hispanics, we will not we will not back the mortgages that are given by banks in your community, right? And so when we talk about gentrification in those contexts is saying for those communities, well, you have had to go through generations of disinvestment, generations of buildings basically crumbling around you because you couldn't get funding to fix them, generations of businesses leaving your communities because there was no reason for a business to move in if the people who lived there just were systemically kind of blocked from having wealth in terms of what they owned, in terms of where they lived, but also where they worked and the type of schools that existed in those communities. And now you're telling them, okay, well, now that your community is somewhat valuable based on where it is, even though it's not like Harlem moved. Harlem was always right on the other side of Central Park. It's not like Brooklyn moved. Brooklyn was always across the river from Manhattan. But because people now want to live in that community, now you have to bear the brunt of that. So now you have to move because people who make double and triple what you make can pay rent and want to live where you live. And so when we talk about gentrification, we have to talk about the impacts of saying to these communities that you cannot have a safe and healthy place to live, and then telling them, okay, well, now your neighborhood is desirable, but you can't stay in those communities.
I've directly been impacted by gentrification just because about 3 years ago I had to move out of my apartment because the rent was getting too high. And it was kind of heartbreaking for me to experience that because, that was my childhood home and I always thought that I was gonna live there. At the time, I didn't really know about gentrification, but finding out more about it, it makes me scared to see people in my community being displaced and to see our culture being washed away. So something about gentrification is that I realized that I was gonna have to be okay with seeing white people enter my community, and I'm fine with that as long as we can live together in a place where people that are like me aren't being displaced.
Okay, what solutions do you or does your organization have for gentrification?
So my organization, which is Project for the Homeless, is not directly, its mission is not really directly related to gentrification, but like many direct service, which is, we are direct service organizations that are fighting poverty or basically addressing social issues. I think it's hard to not be sort of in the world of gentrification by addressing homelessness. We are often working with populations who have been displaced at some point. Living in New York is the most rapidly gentrifying city. It also has the biggest homeless population in the United States, or in any major city in the United States, and there's a housing crisis underway. And I think from a citizenship perspective, I took up the issue of homelessness and decided to kind of make it my passion because it can be really. Oh, is it? So I think to combat gentrification at the individual level, it's really important for people to. I would say I'm gonna start over. To combat gentrification at the individual level, I think it's really important to focus on the values of neighborliness, and it can be easy to be really enraged by such a kind of big dynamic process as gentrification. But if everybody starts viewing their neighborhoods with bitterness and feeling like there's this place that's been lost, and feeling like their neighborhood is getting smaller and smaller, and their neighborhood is really just their apartment and everybody else outside of it is evil, I think that's a very dangerous road to go down, and not necessarily productive. So as much as possible, it is important for neighborhoods to maintain a sense of community and cultural cohesion, because that is really one of the kind of most important and effective ways to stand up to what can be a destabilizing process like gentrification.
What is your view on gentrification and displacement?
Well, when I first heard the statement gentrification is a new colonization, it clicked in my head because a lot of people are being displaced for people with money or people with special resources that people who originally live there don't have. They're being displaced, and it isn't fair at all because they're basically being forced out against conditions they can't control.
Gentrification is a way of pushing people out of their home. That's, in my idea, the core definition of it all. So when you are given an opportunity to push people out, you are giving them a reason to be homeless.